This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. What I'm about to share with you is not a theory, not conjecture, and not based on any agenda. It's a documented, verified United States government report that was released by the House Judiciary Committee on July 25th, 2025. Titled, The Foreign Censorship Threat: How the European Union's Digital Services Act Compels Global Censorship and Infringes on American Free Speech. Yeah, let that sink in. Because this is a direct bipartisan warning about the erosion of your freedom of expression, coming not from some foreign dictatorship, but from our so-called allies in the European Union. And the most alarming part about this is our own institutions, our tech companies, our cultural influencers, even celebrities and non-for-profits have played along. Silently, steadily, for years, as we have witnessed through what Harry and Meghan had done to us. Now, before I begin walking through this report, let me be clear. I never thought I would be saying this about sharing a United States government document that is publicly available, that I risk even just sharing this document, reading from it, or even quoting its findings could be labeled today as misinformation, hate speech, or dangerous rhetoric under European and UK law. Yes, even reading a U.S. congressional document is fair game to be banned, deboosted, demonetized, and/or shadow banned on all these major platforms. This is the world we are now entering into. Why? Because the Digital Services Act, or DSA, has created a new standard of speech, not based on what is illegal, but what is undesirable, uncomfortable, or offensive to those in power. And this law doesn't just apply to Europeans. It is now being enforced worldwide, including here in the United States. The report makes it explicitly clear. The DSA infringes on American online speech by compelling American platforms to suppress lawful speech globally. Think about that. If you're an American, you and I live in a country with a First Amendment. Our speech is legal and is an inalienable right given by God. You and I break no law. But the European Union can order that your post or content, like this video, must be removed. And if a platform fails to comply, it can face massive fines or be shut down entirely across Europe. So what do you think these platforms will do? Obviously, they'll remove our content globally, not because we broke the law, but because it makes a bureaucrat bitch in Brussels uncomfortable. And all of this is happening under the radar because we are too distracted by the bullshit nonsense that we see in society, especially from Harry and Meghan. Both the DSA and UK's Online Safety Act are complex with legal jargon, vague terms like harmful, and enforcement powers given to NGOs and biased foreign regulators. This is exactly what I've been warning everyone about the last 4 years, sounding the alarm, only to be spit in the face and called a conspiracy theorist. And now we're here, and it's become law. This is not one of those instances where I feel good to say that I told you so, but I fucking told you so. Anyhow, we're now in this place where picture a world where people like Christopher Boozy and Sarah Data getting special credentials to be an official flagger of content that gets pulled down. And it should terrify every person who values their liberty, especially to those who experienced this reporting and mass flagging during the height of this psyops between 2020 and 2022. Anyone who dared to talk about Meghan's Fugazi pregnancies lost their accounts and/or were demonetized due to this mass reporting system that these assholes had set up. Now this system is officially legal under law in the EU. Now, for those that are finally awake, let's begin at the core. What is the DSA? According to the EU, the DSA is designed to make the internet safer, reducing online harms. They say it's meant to fight hate speech, misinformation, and systemic risks like disinformation and societal polarization. But here's what that means in practice. Under the DSA, platforms must remove or suppress content that is harmful, misleading, offensive, or even simply not illegal, but judged as contributing to systemic risks. Think about that language. Systemic risk. What does that even mean? Well, apparently, it includes memes, jokes, satire, political slogans, articles about gender or climate change, and posts that challenge migration policy or government health mandates. You know, if Meghan had her way, she'd have us all be put in jail. And don't think that they haven't tried to go after people in America. The report gives a few examples for us to look at. A Polish user posted that electric cars were too expensive and not practical. The Polish government demanded that TikTok take it down. In Germany, a Facebook user criticized the deportation policies for convicted criminals. It was flagged as an attack on human dignity and censored. In France, a post linking terror attacks to refugee flows was removed, despite being factual, legal, and widely debated in political circles. This isn't about protecting people from real threats. It's literally about controlling the narrative globally. Exactly what Harry and Meghan have been showing us all along. Now, you might ask, why would American companies obey European laws? Well, the answer is if they don't, they risk fines up to 6% of their global annual revenue. That's literally billions of dollars. They could be shut down in Europe entirely. So guess what happens? They end up complying. They change their moderation policies and they silence its users. And when a post is flagged under DSA authority, it's not just removed in France, Germany, Poland, it's removed everywhere, including here in the United States. These American platforms are being bullied into submission. Our speech is being filtered through a foreign lens of biased third parties. And this is where this gets even darker. The DSA uses third-party organizations called trusted flaggers to identify and report speech for removal. This is exactly how the Election Integrity Partnership, otherwise known as EIP, was set up for the 2020 election, successfully suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop and conservative voices to influence the election. Then, after the success of controlling behavior, they went ahead and mirrored it to now focus on other topics like COVID, climate, racism, you name it. This was the window of time the original Megxiteers, like myself, were getting deplatformed, demonetized, and ostracized off of every social media platform. Under this new EU law, platforms are legally required to give those flaggers priority handling. That means if one of these groups reports your posts, it jumps to the front of the line, and it's usually taken down without question. So who are these trusted flaggers? They include groups like Hate Aid in Germany, a group that is currently suing X while simultaneously being empowered to censor posts on it, e-Enfance in France, which is directly tied to the government's education ministry, and groups affiliated with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, otherwise known as ISD, and the Center for Countering Digital Hate. You should all be familiar with these groups by now if you've been watching this channel. These are not impartial observers. These are activists with political agendas, sometimes explicitly partisan ones to the left. And this is where the public needs to wake the fuck up, because this web of censorship has not been constructed by anonymous bureaucrats alone. It has been aided, empowered, and in some cases publicly championed by powerful celebrity irritating voices. Let me be very blunt. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been steadily and effectively advocating for these kinds of online speech controls for the past 5 years. They have worked closely with the ISD, the UN's digital governance initiatives. They've supported online safety campaigns directly aligned with CCDH and similar groups like Five Rights Foundation. And while the public laughs about their PR flops, their failed Netflix deals, and their endless self-promotion, I'm no longer laughing. Because while everyone is looking at their failures, they're all missing how they have succeeded in doing something far more lasting. They help normalize the idea that speech is dangerous, that opinions can harm, that debate must be moderated. In 2020, Prince Harry openly criticized the First Amendment. I no longer think that Harry was trying to be funny, but it was definitely a reflection of how he really felt. In 2021, Harry partnered with the Aspen Institute to push for algorithmic changes to suppress harmful speech and penalizing people with taking away their right to earn. By 2023, Meghan Markle was aligning with global digital safety initiatives and organizations that promoted expanded moderation and speech codes. Then in 2024, the launch of that Fugazi Parents Network that focuses on driving policy and regulation, as well as erosion of privacy under the guise of keeping kids safe. This wasn't accidental. It was a strategic partnership with censorship-adjacent organizations. And now the very groups they supported, like CCDH, are cited in the government document as foreign censorship collaborators. The same CCDH that infamously created the disinformation dozen lists used by the Biden administration to justify targeting Americans' voices like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's not a theory, that's a stone-cold fact. CCDH's list was cited in government documents used to pressure social media platforms to silence voices during COVID. Now, you might be thinking, this is Europe's problem. It won't affect me here in the United States. But the platforms have one content policy, and when the choice is between your speech and billions of dollars in European revenue, they will always choose the money. That means your freedom of expression is now considered collateral damage in a global compliance game. So let me go ahead and drive this point home. You can be banned for criticizing climate policy. You know the last couple of videos that I did about King Charles's Sustainable Markets Initiative? I'm pretty sure that those videos have been cut off from the UK because of such low viewership. You can be deplatformed for questioning immigration policy, even if you're citing statistics. You can be flagged for satire because the joke might be offensive. You could be reported for political cartoons, such as this one, because people in the government got their feelings hurt. You can even be investigated for misinformation, for repeating things a government decides are no longer acceptable. We have crossed a red line. This isn't just censorship. This is the criminalization of thought, the monetization of compliance, and the end of genuine debate if this stays in place. And if this continues, we will wake up in a society where truth is what the state approves. Humor is police, and you can be put in jail. Parenting now is regulated. And property, education, religion, all of it is conditional upon compliance. Think that sounds dystopian? I'm sure there are a few listening and saying right now, oh, that will never happen, or want some censorship because they may feel some things they listen to should be pulled down just because they don't like it. We see it in all forms in this space. But just wait till when the shoe is on the other foot and now you are the one that's being taken down. Free speech is not about speech that's always comfortable. It also has to go for the speech that is uncomfortable as well. But in order to help you understand and drive this point home, let me paint a picture of what life could look like if this continues to go unchecked. So in this future, which is already here, schools no longer teach critical thinking. They teach approved narratives. If your child questions any of the demonic New World Order on gender ideology, criticizes environmental mandates, or reference faith-based values, they're flagged for harmful speech or disinformation. Parents objecting at school board meetings are labeled domestic terrorists, and the cops come for them, like what was going on in the United States during the Biden regime. Sadly, in this bleak new world, those videos will never go viral because they're suppressed before they even get to spread anywhere. so no one knows you've been locked away for just protecting and raising your child. Number 2, digital blacklisting becomes normal. So let's say you apply for a job, a bank account, or an apartment, but an algorithm scans your online presence and flags you for violating hate speech codes. Even if what you said was legal and factual or in agreement with the amount of likes of others, maybe you posted a meme that joked about bureaucracy, or you shared a study that questioned climate models. Or maybe, heaven forbid, you expressed support for a political candidate who isn't favored by the transnational NGOs. That's all it takes. You are quietly placed on a list. No notification, no appeal. Just a digital exile where your whole entire life in the physical world is now affected. Number 3, speech licenses becoming required. You're probably saying, huh? Yeah, I've actually seen places online where there are lunatics that are actually suggesting this. So to post or create content, you're going to need to verify your identity and agree to a digital service code. Platforms will require you to complete mandatory digital civics training before you can even post. Just like a driver's license, your speech license can be suspended or revoked for reckless discourse. And if your views are ever deemed dangerous by a government-approved NGO, your access can be throttled, monitored, or turned off completely. Now, I find that's a very scary future if we get to that place. Number 4, religious speech is reframed as radicalism. Faith communities begin to vanish online, not because they broke any laws, but because their views are considered exclusionary or harmful to the LGBTQ plus persons, or heaven forbid, too family-oriented. Quoting religious scripture is algorithmically suppressed. Prayers and sermons are deranked. Christian, Jewish, and other traditional voices are silenced under vague policies that say their beliefs might negatively impact civil discourse. And platforms? Oh, they're going to comply. Not because it's illegal to be religious, but because it's politically risky to allow you to speak. You then become a liability. Number 5, medical opinions become criminalized. Remember, COVID was just a preview. Doctors who oppose centralized health mandates, vaccine schedules, or mental health redefinitions find themselves under investigation. A physician who says puberty blockers harm children is defamed, debanked, and suspended from professional platforms. An autism researcher who connects behavioral issues to environmental causes is deplatformed for spreading unverified science. Once medical truth is set by bureaucrats, dissent becomes a punishable act. And number 6, I think this is going to hit home for a lot of people. Property rights dissolving under speech violations. Imagine losing your ability to advertise, let's say if you're a farmer, your farm, rent your apartment, or sell your goods online because your online history shows you once criticized government sustainability mandates. And you know why I'm bringing this up, because of the last couple of videos that I covered pertaining to King Charles's Sustainable Markets Initiative. So you oppose 15-minute cities. You're a threat to urban cohesion, that whole unity thing. You question UN climate forecasts. You're endangering global progress. Now, you're ineligible for green energy credits, mortgage programs, or public services. You see, this is where all of this has been going. And we know this because we've begun to get a taste of it. Now, let's look at history for the proof of why this doesn't work. So, starting with East Germany's Stasi regime in the 20th century, citizens were encouraged to inform on neighbors for ideological dissent. Whispers against the party could cost you your job, your home, your freedom. I believe many saw the same behavior during COVID. The most effective censorship wasn't done through force, it was done through fear and self-policing. Today, so-called trusted flaggers play that role, quietly encouraging platforms to take down problematic narratives. You don't need a prison when you can create a prison of silence. Now, this next one I think is an excellent example. We have China's social credit system. Though framed and marketed as a tool to reward good behavior, the system punishes wrong speech, wrong affiliations, and even the wrong tone. If you question the state, associate with the wrong people, or offend the wrong bureaucracy, you lose. And what you're losing is your access to travel, the ability to buy property, and sometimes even the right to have children. Now ask yourself, how different is that from being shadow banned, demonetized, and blocked from banking services after you post something on X? The difference literally is one of degrees, not of kind. You know those British libel laws of the 19th century? Before the age of the internet, British authorities used libel, blasphemy, and sedition laws to crush political dissent. Radical authors and preachers were imprisoned for punishing anti-establishment pamphlets. The laws didn't protect the citizens, they protected royalty, clergy, and the empire. If you're in the UK and you're able to watch this video, what are we seeing now that's happening in the UK? Ironically, the British monarchy is again adjacent to a regime of speech control as Prince Harry and Meghan align with global NGOs to suppress what they deem harmful content. So we must ask, what kind of world are we building where a post, a prayer, or a joke can get you censored? What is the logical end of this ridiculous ideology? If governments, tech companies, and NGOs now claim that speech equals harm, then your rights are conditional on someone else's comfort and feelings. If speech becomes criminal, if truth becomes decided by boards, if jokes are filtered by committees, then guess what, folks? Democracy is dead. Check out this woman, Claire Melford, who is the CEO of the UK-based NGO Global Disinformation Index. Here, she openly admits that the EU's Digital Services Act is being used to suppress conservative voices, enforce censorship, and restrict free expression.
Claire Melford, the CEO of Global Disinformation Index, to speak.
Thank you very much to the Chair and the Committee for this opportunity. Spring 2024, ahead of the European parliamentary elections, a network of extreme apocalyptic bloggers spread alarmist immigrant-based stories across YouTube, Rumble and TikTok. Their reward? Over €2 million in ad revenue and the election of significantly more far-right MEPs. The CSO Media Matters Europe reported this in June 2024. The Digital Services Act, the DSA, has the tools to prevent this. Articles 34 and 35 require very large online platforms to assess and mitigate systemic risks related to this sort of disinformation. Article 39 mandates ad transparency, and Article 42 establishes transparency reporting obligations. Enforcing these could have allowed earlier detection of coordinated campaigns and the pressure on platforms to stop the algorithmic amplification and monetization of harmful content. December 2024, DFR Lab analysed how coordinated social media campaigns helped fuel independent candidate Călin Georgescu's rise in the Romanian elections. His campaign hashtag amassed over 1 billion views. Telegram served as a hub, amplifying content across multiple platforms, and paid influencers on FameUp promoted his message without disclosure of their payments. This strategy of pro-Georgescu Telegram channels exactly mirrors tactics used by pro-Russian actors in Moldova's elections. Enforcing DSA Articles 34 and 40, requiring VLOPs to mitigate risks to electoral processes and enabling cross-border cooperation, could have flagged and removed such behaviour sooner. Since 2022, EU Disinfo Lab and many other organisations have been reporting on the Russia-linked doppelganger campaign, as we've just heard. Faked versions of trusted European sites, Der Spiegel, Guardian and others, mixing legitimate content copied and then mixed with fabricated pro-Russian narratives to mislead European citizens about the war in Ukraine, all while earning significant ad revenue. The DSA's transparency rules could disrupt such operations. These are just a few examples of the very real harms to European citizens being experienced daily. The CSOs that report this research and expose these harms, and the parts of the DSA which, if robustly enforced, would prevent these harms. All these harms are caused by the weaponization of engagement-driven algorithms for profit or political ends. They undermine our trust in democracy, human rights, and scientific progress. The algorithms that determine what you and I see in our feeds and the associated adverts are being gamed. These algorithms are programmed to select the most engaging content, to keep us there for as long as possible, to ensure we can be shown the maximum number of ads or buy the maximum amount of things. Engagement is highest with polarizing content. Since 2012, when Facebook pioneered the engagement-driven algorithm, the more enraging the content, the more likely it is to get promoted, and the more likely the content creator is to earn ad revenue alongside the social media company. This enragement equals engagement equals ad revenue formula has normalized the extreme and, in effect, chilled the free speech of more moderate citizens. Those who claim we are living in an age of increasing censorship are naming the wrong victim and the wrong perpetrator. It is the algorithm that selects what gets promoted, and it is the more moderate middle who are no longer heard online, for the simple reason their speech is not as profitable. And yet the good news is we in Europe have the weapons in our arsenal to stop this. We have the regulations encoded within the DSA and its associated codes of conduct, which can break the weaponization of engagement-driven algorithms by hostile foreign powers and profiteers. The tech companies have to comply, and the European Commission has to enforce. Reporting from CSOs on VLOP compliance has highlighted inconsistencies. Meta's quarterly transparency reports claimed 90% accuracy in hate speech detection, but did not explain the number. TikTok's September 2024 risk assessment summary contained generalized statements on robust content moderation, but no metrics on prevalence of harmful content or details on algorithmic promotion. The CSO Algo Watch testing revealed TikTok algorithm was 11 times more likely to recommend anti-vaccine content to health-skeptical users, in direct contravention of TikTok's own policy. And the monetization of harmful content continues due to the challenges of an opaque digital advertising system, estimated at 80 billion euros per year. Much of that system is not covered by the DSA. Programmatic digital ad campaigns often run over 40,000 websites, sometimes with the involvement of 50 or more intermediaries, making it challenging for advertisers to know where their ads are appearing. This complexity and opacity can lead to the inadvertent funding of unsuitable and illegal material and has created perfect environments for criminals to siphon off billions in ad fraud. Enforcement by DSCs across the 27 member states is also fragmented, as national capabilities and resources vary greatly. At GDI, we consider 6 areas as key. 1. Standardized investigation protocols to help DSCs identify and address violations efficiently, especially for complex cases. 2. Resource allocation frameworks to ensure DSCs have adequate technical expertise, staff and tools to monitor and enforce compliance. 3. Clear escalation pathways for cross-border cases that require collaboration between DSCs. 4. Transparency requirements for enforcement actions, helping to build the public's trust. 5. Structured engagement with platforms, civil society and academic experts to improve detection and enforcement. And 6. Measurement frameworks to track the enforcement and improve and identify areas for improvement. The DSA is different. It is not like other pieces of service regulation. The online information ecosystem, which it seeks to regulate, is not easily bounded or measured. Instead, it is like the sea for the fish, everything, everywhere, all the time. Regulating the companies that have such huge control over our information space is complex, and by necessity relies on a network of organizations that have the expertise to recognize when the rights of citizens, often vulnerable citizens, are being infringed. This gives CSOs a unique place in the DSA, which is rightly recognized in the Act's text. The CSOs and researchers are the European Union's foot soldiers in the information war. Just as the Russian kinetic war is escalating on the front in Ukraine, necessitating extraordinary measures from Europe's nations to defend their sovereignty, the information war is also accelerating, and this too will require extraordinary measures from those charged with defending Europe's frontline information space. But these CSO foot soldiers are in trouble. They have become the front line. They are under attack. Those who benefit from the unregulated nature of the information space, using it for profit or propaganda, are attacking both the foot soldiers, the CSOs, and the defense shield, the DSA. These attacks, whether internal or external, cynical or misguided, will, if successful, all have the same beneficiary, Russia. 2 urgent steps Europe could take. Firstly, coordinate cross-border enforcement. Disinformation is transnational and requires agile, multi-jurisdictional responses and joint investigative teams and standardized sanctions to prevent illegal content syndication. And 2, formalize the support for the CSO role in DSA enforcement and establish an emergency fund that protects CSOs from baseless lawsuits designed to silence their work. The battle over Europe's information space is real. The tools exist to fight back, but they must be enforced. The EU must ensure that CSOs have the support to continue their portion of this vital work and make the defences in the information war as robust as those required in the real-life war. Thank you.
And all that's left is a soft dictatorship, governed not by force, but by likes, terms of service, and community guidelines you didn't write and cannot appeal. So, here I am once again saying, this is your warning. If we don't stop this shit now, this is going to become our new normal. And sadly, what I fear is that there are too many people who just either are complacent and don't care, or they secretly want it because they are convinced we need it because they don't like some things that are being said online. But they don't realize how this could hurt them in the future. People like me, who had been censored by Harry and Meghan, knows what it feels like to be penalized and have a God-given right taken away. My human rights and civil rights were violated when they took the ability for me to earn in order to just live and survive away. All because I made cartoons that Meghan didn't like and shared my opinion and criticized all the propaganda that was being put out into the public domain and shoved down our throats. Part of what angers me about all of this was that this was a military-grade censorship operation with these disinformation campaigns that were purposely put out there to cause division and to get us to react. That's all this really was. And those that reacted, they went after in order to test the system, in order to go ahead and give the excuse of why we need to push regulation harder around speech. It's infuriating that they put us through all of that for nothing, all because they needed to create this facade of so much harm happening online so they could push this shit. With this DSA and Online Safety Act in the UK, they have made this system now legal with worse consequences. That's how evil these people are. In the UK, the Online Safety Act is now fully enforced. Police have arrested citizens for online posts. Videos of protests, like those in Leeds over mass migration, are being blocked and removed before they go viral. Did anybody know about these protests? I didn't until people started talking about the information being suppressed. It turns out the UK citizens are upset over migration and what the government is allowing under a two-tiered system. But they don't want the world and their failures to be seen, as well as how they are treating their tax-paying citizens. And under these laws, refusing to use, let's say, a preferred pronoun, expressing skepticism about net zero policies, or suggesting elections were flawed can all be grounds for censorship. That's not just policy. That's tyranny, and the UK is officially there. I think a big question on people's minds now is the UK officially lost? Because you can't even talk about this migration and the destruction that's going on, and seeing how the UK has fully clamped down utilizing this Online Safety Act, I think is very concerning. So what can be done? Well, this report suggests legislation like the No Censorship on Our Shores Act, which would block foreign censorship mandates from influencing U.S. companies. And I think not only is it going to take the United States to put pressure and force onto our allies with saying, look, we're allies with you because you share the same principles that we do, which freedom of speech is one of those core tenets. And if you're not sharing those anymore, then we might not be allies. And that's an important key to all of this. If the UK and the EU, who claim that they're so democratic, should not be creating legislation that is intended to tear down the First Amendment. Now, before I go, the last part of this video, I want to cover the very end of this report, which are the exhibits that were included. In these exhibits, Jim Jordan, who is a United States congressman for Ohio, really gives it to the EU and calls out their bullshit. In an exchange that began in August of 2024, Jim Jordan writes to Thierry Breton, "Dear Mr. Breton, the Committee on the Judiciary and the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government of the United States House of Representatives are conducting oversight on how and to what extent the executive branch of the United States government has coerced or colluded with companies and other intermediaries to censor lawful speech. As part of our oversight, the Select Subcommittee has received testimony about how officials from other governments, including you and other officials in the European Union, have sought to censor speech, including political speech, online. In light of your recent threats of reprisal towards X Corp, an American company, for facilitating political discourse in the United States, we write to demand that you stop any attempt to intimidate individuals or entities engaged in political speech in the United States, and that you take no action to otherwise interfere in the American democratic process." Remember, this was about Donald Trump actually doing one of those spaces on X, and the European Union freaked out over it. He continues on to write, "In the United States, government censorship of speech is unacceptable, and political speech in particular sits at the very core of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Here, political candidates have a right to broadcast their message to voters, and voters have a right to hear from the people running to represent them. Here, government bureaucrats may not intimidate, coerce, or threaten individuals engaged in free speech. Free expression in the marketplace of ideas is a cherished and fundamental American value that sets the United States apart as the world's foremost democracy." Are you listening, Prince Harry? Regrettably, the EU does not share the United States' commitment to free expression in the digital age. The EU's Digital Services Act, passed in 2022, is Europe's comprehensive internet regulation regime. It requires so-called very large online platforms operating in the EU, such as X, Facebook, and YouTube, to censor broad and vague categories of online speech, including alleged misinformation, no matter where the speech originated. These provisions, if adopted in America, would clearly violate the First Amendment by prohibiting individuals' right to free expression. The EU law is also bad policy. By manipulating the marketplace of ideas, government coercion, not merit, shapes public debate and the discourse of ideas. In recent days, You have used these provisions to threaten X with adverse action if the company does not censor constitutionally protected speech originating in the United States. On August 12th, X broadcasted a highly publicized conversation between its owner, Elon Musk, and President Donald Trump, the current Republican nominee in the upcoming election. Ahead of this interview, you made veiled threats towards Mr. Musk, warning that you would not hesitate to weaponize your DSA enforcement toolbox if you deemed the content of the interview to be harmful. You wrote to Mr. Musk that even though the interview would take place in the United States, you would be highly vigilant for potential spillovers in the EU. You also approvingly referenced the United Kingdom's recent efforts to arrest citizens for online speech disfavored by government authorities. As the U.S. election approaches, American voters have the constitutional right to hear from nominees for public office, including President Trump. In the United States, political candidates have the right to express their views, and journalists have the right to report and question candidates for public office. Your recent threats to Mr. Musk and X Corp for facilitating political discourse in the United States are antithetical to fundamental American values and an inappropriate intrusion in the American democratic process. These actions must stop immediately. To ensure that the American democratic process is not corrupted by your unilateral regulatory conduct, we request a briefing about 1. The European Commission's efforts to intimidate, threaten, or coerce Elon Musk or X Corp in connection with Mr. Musk's interview of President Donald Trump. 2, efforts by the European Commission to use EU law to force companies to censor American speech. And 3, any communications the European Commission has had with the Biden-Harris administration to use EU law as a way to bypass the First Amendment. So after Thierry gets his ass handed to him by Jim Jordan, he responds back, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a whole lot of word salad, but the key points that I want you to hear from this letter is the arrogance of these Europeans who think that they can regulate and do whatever they want and we have to listen. Anyway, he writes, "Dear Chairman Jordan, I would like to thank the Committee on the Judiciary and the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government of the United States House of Representatives for giving the European Commission the opportunity to dispel some misinterpretations regarding our letter to X on August 12, 2024. It's always those misinterpretations from the Europeans, as if we don't speak the same English, right? Anyhow, free speech is a pillar of our European democracy, just as in the United States. The essence of your First Amendment is at the core of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights and the European Convention on Human Rights, which are legally binding on all EU institutions and 27 member states under the judicial control of the European courts. Thus, let me state up front, contrarily to what has been claimed, nowhere in the letter did we call into question the broadcasting of an interview with a presidential candidate or any similar event. The European Commission would never interfere in the American democratic process or aim to censor freedom of expression within or beyond its borders. It is ill-founded and simply incorrect to suggest otherwise. It's like, how dare you, America, for calling us out on our hypocrisy? Anyhow, the United States and the EU share many of these same concerns in relation to the societal risks and harms caused by online platforms. In the EU, transparency, accountability, trust, and empowerment of users online are well-established principles and now enshrined in the Digital Services Act, a law passed in 2022 by the EU legislator that became applicable in 2023. The objective of the DSA is to ensure that everyone in the EU can enjoy online platform services safely and in full respect of the fundamental rights which we share, including privacy, dignity, the protection of minors, security, democracy, and of course, freedom of speech and of information. Like the way that this guy kicked off this letter is so patronizing, honestly. But throughout this letter, he goes into explaining this wonderful regime that they have put in place and how it's protecting democracy. I mean, literally nothing but word salad. Well, needless to say, Jim Jordan is not having any of this word salad and fires back with the most glorious letter to Thierry Breton. He writes, "Dear Mr. Breton, we received your response to our August 15th letter about your threats of reprisal towards Elon Musk, an American citizen and X Corp, an American company, for facilitating political discourse in the United States. Your response, however, failed to alleviate our concerns that you may attempt to censor or suppress lawful speech in the United States using the European Union's EU Digital Services Act. We write to reiterate our position that the EU's burdensome regulation of online speech must not infringe on protected American speech, to note the inaccurate statements in your response, and to accept your offer of a European Commission staff briefing. First, your claim that the DSA does not regulate content is contradicted by the text of the DSA and by your own actions. The DSA, as you admit in your letter, requires very large online platforms, otherwise known as VLOPs, such as X, Facebook, and YouTube, to take mitigation measures against alleged disinformation. The DSA defines disinformation as a type of content, and because the DSA regulates disinformation, the DSA, contrary to your claims, otherwise regulates content. In fact, in your threat letter to Elon Musk, you made clear that the DSA obligates X to censor allegedly harmful content disfavored by the EU. In addition, according to reports, you and a team from the EU visited the headquarters of X, then Twitter, in San Francisco last year to review how the company responds to what EU regulators view as problematic tweets. Both ones they flag from centers in Europe and ones they don't, and to look at why certain content might slip through the cracks. Your threats against free speech do not occur in a vacuum, and the consequences are not limited to Europe. The harms caused by EU-imposed censorship spill across international borders, as many platforms genuinely maintain one set of content moderation policies that they apply globally. Thus, the EU's regulatory censorship regime may limit what content Americans can view in the United States. American companies also have an enormous incentive to comply with the DSA and public threats from EU commissioners like you. If these companies fail to censor content deemed by a European official to be harmful or disinformation, the DSA authorizes the EC to impose a punitive fine of up to 6% of the company's global revenue, which for many American companies would amount to billions of dollars. Second, your assertion that you would never interfere in the American democratic process is contradicted by your actions. You claim that you decided to write to Mr. Musk to ensure that X's trust and safety systems function properly to cope with a likely spike of online activity, which could amplify dissemination in the EU of posts by users potentially containing illegal content, disinformation, or posts which run counter to the terms and conditions of the platform. However, to the best of our knowledge, you have not sent a similar unsolicited letter concerning a likely spike in online activity for any other American political discourse that has been broadcast live on X and that could be alleged to include purported disinformation or harmful content. If you have sent such an unsolicited letter, you certainly did not do so in such a public manner as you did with your letter to Musk. The only logical inference from your actions is that your letter was intended as a threat to Musk, that the EU would, as you warned, make full use of its toolbox if he facilitated political speech with which you disagreed. Your letter, and for that matter, the EC and the DSA, seem to miss a fundamental point about free speech. To oppose censorship of so-called disinformation is not to defend or to endorse the content. It is to respect the right and the ability of citizens to consume content and to make decisions about what speech is persuasive, what is truthful, and what is accurate. To oppose censorship is to acknowledge that a government with the authority to define disinformation will inevitably do so in a way that benefits those in power at the expense of the truth. As demonstrated by your letter, EU officials are not above factual mistakes and misunderstandings. Dissenting voices matter because the expert consensus is often wrong, as shown most recently by the devastating consequences of the government-imposed lockdowns. Like literally blew this guy up. Well, needless to say, soon after this letter was published, Thierry Breton stepped down from his position. Enter in Ms. Henna Verkunen, who Jim Jordan has a similar exchange, again getting nowhere, so Jim decides to go to her boss, which is Ursula von der Leyen, the woman that Trump will be meeting with tomorrow in Scotland. So just so you know, Jim Jordan writes to Ursula on February 27, 2025. She completely ignores him. So tomorrow is not going to go down so well, especially if Trump knows that this is going on, which I'm pretty sure he is very well aware because this censorship thing is kicking off everywhere online. Let's not forget, Trump also has a platform of his own that's going to have to deal with all of this. So anyway, Jim Jordan writes, Dear President von der Leyen, the Committee on the Judiciary of the U.S. House of Representatives is conducting oversight of how and to what extent foreign laws, regulations, and judicial orders compel or coerce companies to censor speech in the United States. As part of this oversight, on February 26, 2025, the committee issued subpoenas to 8 technology companies operating in the United States, requiring them to produce communications with the European Commission and other European governance bodies regulated to content moderation or suppression of speech on social media. We write today to notify you that we expect to receive communications sent or received by EC officials over the coming weeks and months on an ongoing basis. As we assess this material, we respectfully urge the EC to rededicate itself to the fundamental principle of free expression and the notion that the solution to so-called bad speech is not enforced silence, but additional speech. The committee is concerned by the proliferation of foreign censorship laws, regulations, and judicial orders that threaten Americans' constitutionally protected right to speak freely online. For example, the EU's Digital Services Act, DSA, requires social media and other online platforms to have systemic processes to remove misleading or deceptive content, including so-called disinformation, even when such content is not legal, or else face fines amounting to billions of dollars. Europe's censorship efforts may harm Americans' ability to speak freely online because many social media platforms generally maintain one set of content moderation policies that they apply globally. The most restrictive censorship laws may set the de facto global censorship standards. Indeed, global censorship appears to be the purpose of the DSA. In August 2024, then European Commissioner for Internal Market and Services, Thierry Breton, publicly threatened regulatory retaliation against X Corp if it permitted American political speech to spill over into the EU. For these reasons, the committee issued subpoenas to technology companies operating in the U.S. for all communications with European government officials regarding content moderation or suppression of speech on social media. These subpoenas are continuing in nature, meaning that they apply to past and future communications. These companies will begin producing documents to the committee shortly. We write as a courtesy to notify you that the committee will begin to receive communications with EC officials and to invite you to supplement our record with additional information you believe is relevant to our understanding of the EC's censorship regime. The committee will do everything in its power to protect Americans' free speech rights, including developing legislative solutions to counter foreign attempts to interfere in America's marketplace of ideas. Pursuant to the rules of the House of Representatives, the Committee on the Judiciary has jurisdiction to conduct oversight of matters concerning civil liberties to inform potential legislative reforms. If you have any questions about this matter, there you go. Now, I think that tomorrow's meeting with Ursula might be a little uncomfortable. Don't you think?
But part of what we're going to have to do is to start experimenting with new forms of journalism and how do we use social media in ways that reaffirm facts, separate facts from opinion. We want diversity of opinion. We don't want diversity of fact. By the way, it will require some government, I believe, some government regulatory constraints around some of these business models in a way that's consistent with the First Amendment, but that also says, look, there is a difference between these platforms letting all voices be heard versus a business model that elevates the most hateful voices or the most polarizing voices or the most dangerous in the sense of inciting violence voices. And that I think is going to be a big challenge for all of us that we're going to have to undertake.
Anyhow, that's all I got for you. The most that I could ask you to do for me is like this video, and if you can, screenshot this graphic and share it everywhere. At least we are all doing our own little part, because you know what they say, shavings make a pile, and if we can get enough voices together, then people will start to listen. Anyhow, on that note, definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.